As Ronald would say, good evening, good afternoon, good night, goodbye, hello,
And good morning.
and good morning. Yeah, I left that one out too.
Yeah,
Uh, Hold on, I got to click a button here. There we go. Welcome back to Outreach Noah Studies. Just like the way Ronald brings it up, because we do have, people from everywhere that joins us. And of course, like Ronald, you're in the midday there tomorrow for me, and tonight I'm going into sun hadn't set quite here yet here in southeast Tennessee. So I think we're what, 15 hours, 15, 16 hours apart,
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
I think it's
So,
14 or 15 at the moment. But
oh,
when it
how
changes around
beautiful.
from each side, I keep
Yeah.
forgetting. But yeah, roughly around 15 normally.
Technology, can be used for the evil, but it's really good when it's used for the good. And it's so nice that, we do live, it's a huge planet, considering if you're standing out in the yard and thinking how big it is, but then look at the technology and how it's made smaller with being able to get together. And then um, one of the astronauts on the Artemis, I was reading some statements that one of the, I think it was the lady, she made one of the, they were talking about what was, amazing, something that they seen, something that they had, yeah, it was her. She said one of the most impactful things is when she seen the earth as this little bitty dot engulfed in blackness and how small it was. And she uses the term that, like with them, the four of them, they were a crew. And she said when she saw that, and then she saw that the earth is really a crew, the humanity is a crew. And I thought that was really interesting. But she said that was what was so impactful, and she just seen it as just like when we look out at a star and we see how small it is. But she goes, but from the backside of the moon, and the Earth was just this little bitty, spot surrounded in blackness. Just all there by itself. And it was kind of interesting to listen to her describe that. But our technology has made it where we can become closer.
Yeah, and give us
And,
this glitches, which I've got. I can't
do
join
what?
the live chat at the moment.
Can't join the live chat.
No, on YouTube because it's come up and it says create a channel to join the live chat. And I'm
Oh,
not
the
going to
live
do that
chat.
because I've done that before and created a new Outreach Noah channel, which interferes at times. And I'm not sure which one I'm in at the moment by the look of it. I might not be in the right one. Oh, okay. Okay, just letting Janice and Linda in.
That'll work. Hello, Janice, Linda. And of course, we got Veronica and Ronald here with us tonight as well.
And Dan.
We're just getting started. Ronald's having a little bit of
Got it.
technical fun over there.
Yeah, yeah. It gave me the one I accidentally created the other week because I didn't understand what it was saying. And I thought I was coming over to Outreach Noah's YouTube channel and I created a new one that has
Right.
no access. I've got it back. I was able to change accounts and it worked.
Okay. Good
So,
deal.
I have access to the live chat. Anybody puts up
All
any
right, Ron.
questions?
Yeah, is anything come in through the email this week or
No,
okay.
no, there hasn't. But I will check
And what it
because I just realised I'm in a different window too. That may have been why it glitched. I have two Firefox windows open, one with that services us and another one that services Kabat and other things that I might need during the session, but it's brought up the other one. It connected in the other window. That's probably why I had the hiccup because it was already opened to be in the right place.
right.
And It doesn't seem to be anything, but the Gmails have got a temporary error there. There wasn't anything yesterday.
All righty.
I'll sort that as we go and see if there is anything for you, Terry.
Okay. What is the Gmail there, Ronald?
Outreachnoah@gmail.com.
All right. If you got any questions, comments, whatever, you can contact us at the Gmail account there that Ronald gave us, outreachnoah@gmail.com, right?
That's correct. Yep.
It's almost a tongue twister sometimes. And tonight, while we're live on YouTube, live chat's up now.
Yes.
All righty. Live chat's on YouTube. And of course, you can go into a simple walk. And we have the links to the YouTube channel if you want to come in that way as well. And of course, this is going to be recorded audio wise, and Ronald gives that to Scotty, and it'll here in a few days it'll be up on the Power Faith Radio internet station. Then you can go there and listen to it as well.
Yeah.
Okie doke. Tonight, any other announcements we need to
make, Ronald,
before we get started?
No, I'd just like to say that Scotty's GoFundMe for the electric wheelchair for Danielle, the chair has been ordered. The money came up reasonably quick, and so the order was put in. So they're expecting delivery. It might have even been delivered by now, but delivery's on the way, and so that'll be.
That's good because he was wanting to have it here before her birthday.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, tonight we're going to continue in our journey here in Genesis chapter 4. And I had originally posted 12 through 15, but tonight I'm probably going to stop with 14. As I was going over everything again this morning, as it normally happens on Wednesdays, it seems to be something that happens more times than not. I'll find myself digging through some stuff because there was something I missed or didn't see or something my eyes was open to. And I had one of those this morning as Rabbi Hirsch was closing up his message on 13 and 14. And he mentioned this one Hebrew word that stopped me in my tracks. And with what he says there, when we get there, we're going to be going. I want to end right there because I've got something I want to cover based around one sentence and one word that he mentions at the end of his teaching on verses 13, 14. He's got them combined. So I'm looking forward to getting to that and having some discussion there with that section there. Okay, we've been talking. Last week was the discussion of that Hashem had with the blood of his brother crying out, his curse coming upon him from the ground because of the spilled blood. We discussed that last week. So in verse 12 this week, he says, verse 12, when you till the ground, he's talking to Cain here, when you till the ground, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You shall become restless or a wanderer and friendless, an exile. The two words there in the Hebrew that he translates restless and friendless most of the time is translated as a wanderer and an exile upon the earth. He said, you will become a wanderer and you will be exiled upon the earth. He says, from the ground, it is separated. No, wait a minute. I went over that last week. Sorry, had my arm covered up. He says, the earth's subordination to man In verse 12, the earth's subordination to man, which we've covered before when we were talking about when Adam was commanded to subdue the earth. We covered a lot of there. So if you want to find those passages there in the classes that we had, we were talking about when they were just, to settle the earth, subdue it, and to prosper and all that. It says the earth's subordination to man is an elevation for the earth, which we had discussed in the past. It becomes elevated. For its powers are used to further man's moral aims. And what we learned in the past is that when Adam and Eve chose to eat from the tree, there was a choice of life or death. They chose the death, which was a process. That day they ate, they began the process of dying. And Rabbi Hirsch even talks about how they took on the commandment to die. And it's interesting in one fact that an ancient Roman way of looking at that is memento mori, to remember to die. And it happens to be remember your mortality. And so when they chose the death and they were put outside the outside the garden and back on the earth that's outside of the garden, Rabbi Hirsch showed us that because they chose that path, then the ground, which was the Hadama, the ground in which they lived, when it says Eretz, earth, in the Torah, in these realms, it's not talking about the planet. It's talking about the surface of the earth. The surface of the earth becomes the stage in which man would live out his life. It would become the stage in which he would learn morality and ethics. And that's what Rabbi Hirsch is bringing back up here again. When the earth's subordination to man, when man took it, it became elevated because now its powers are used, the powers that comes up out of the earth, growing the vegetation, the building of settlements and societies and everything that happens upon the earth. It furthered man's moral aims because this was the stage in which he would learn morals. He would be trained in morality. He'd be trained in ethics. And that's one of his sole purposes, was to do that. Man was to learn how to behave, how to live, how to act. But now we've got a situation that's going on that hadn't happened yet. But because of this first murder, Rabbi Hirsch goes on and says, but crime severs the bond between man and earth. And we've talked a lot about that in the past. And I think one of my first blogs I wrote back in 2010 is climate change is real. And man causes the climate to change, not by having vehicles and cows doing their stuff. I seen another article on that again today. It's educated idiots that writes that stuff. What changes climate is man's moral behavior. Because we've learned multiple places, and where we get this to begin with is when in the first part of Genesis, in that first week, we learn as God's creating, and it says, that the grasses in the trees hadn't sprouted yet because there was no rain that had fallen on the earth. And the sages of Israel teaches us the reason why there was no rain was because there was no man to pray for the rain. Once man prayed for the rain, the rain would come down. This is all dealing with the weather. This is all dealing with the climate. And his moral character, whether good or evil, impacts the earth's reaction back to us. And as I'd learned years ago through that passage, through that verse, because there was no rain upon the earth, because there was no man to pray for the rain, is that when man tarries from God, he strays from God, the earth strays from man. The only time the earth returns back to man is when he returns back to God. And so we're learning this right here again. Crime severs the bond between man and earth. God says the earth will no longer yield its power. This is the true cause of climate change, folks. It's a biblical issue. It's a moral issue. Yes, we do have the stewardship. We're supposed to be stewards of the earth, and we want to take care of this. Doesn't mean gives us a license to go out and do whatever. If we can do things more conservative, that's smart, using our intellect and doing things right, that helps. But no matter what we do to try to fix the earth and making cars don't burn less gas and put out less fumes, none of that's going to really impact the earth as long as man is evil. There's nothing that we can do to fix the earth as long as man is evil toward man. When man is evil toward man, the earth says, I don't want anything to do with you. It's not only God that turns from us, the earth turns from us. And that's what he's saying here. The earth will no longer yield its power to you. That means storms are going to be more apt. Earthquakes are going to be more apt. Hurricanes, tsunamis, all of this stuff would start fading away as man would turn back toward God. He goes on, but if man severs the bond between himself and God, then God severs the bond between man and earth. So you see what we have here? If we do crimes on earth, man to man, the earth no longer yields its power. If we break our bond with God, God then severs the bond between man and earth. Do you see what's going on there? When it's man to man, we break the bond with earth. When it's between us and God, God breaks the bond between man and earth.
It's also, I believe, stated in the Messianic era, that the countries that don't come to the temple once a year, the rains will be withheld.
Yeah. And that's one of the first things. God threatens Israel all the time with their obedience. And the first thing is they lose the rain. And that happens with the nations as well. Like in the Messianic era, when the nations will send their representatives up to Jerusalem to observe Sukkot, those of the nations that don't go, rain will be withheld. It's always the situation with man and earth. I mean, that's part of who we are. We're part earth. We're a very unique being, that we're part heaven and part earth through God breathing into us. Rabbi Hirsch goes on and says, from then onward, man still lives on the terrestrial globe, but he has no Adama, the ground, for his feet, and the ground ceases to be an Adama for him. When it's Adama, it's yielding its power. The earth is working with man in partnership. But when we break this bond, when the bond is broke, let me say that when the bond is broken with earth, the ground ceases to be a blessing. And so going on with Cain, in that, like we said, that word, the wanderer, or here he says restless. He's a wanderer. Means they find no resting place. A wanderer finds no resting place. That's why he chooses the English word restless. The wanderer finds no resting place. Cain will not find a resting place for the sole of his foot. He is cut off from the earth and has no spot on it to call his own. And that's one of the things that I'd learned that the sages had talked about in the past. When God blesses a people and gives a people a nation, there comes a point in the time, it doesn't have to happen, but this is what's happened through history. When a nation becomes evil, they lose the divine right for the land. And the Creator will send in another group of people to take it away from them. They've lost the right to exist on it. And that's happened time and time again when you see things in the past and you see where one nation would take another nation and take it over. And those are signs that there's something that was going on in the land. That God sent someone in. They lost the right to occupy the land. And that's what he's talking about here. They become wanderers. They don't have a home. They don't have a place to call their own. Then he uses the word that's translated as exile or friendless upon the earth. Rabbi Hirsch goes on, he says, being an exile refers to a man, means to being isolated from fellow men. The basic meaning is to be separate, is to separate things that by nature that belong together. And it's like, with Israel, when they violated, the Creator, and he exiled the people, he separated them from the land in which he gave. They are meant to be together. And so when where there is land or whether there is also a people that you should be together with, there are crimes you could commit that separates you from them. And it's like in Torah law for Israel, for Torah law that God gave Israel, there are several penalties for specific sins. And one of those is separating, to put them outside the city. And that's the way they also took care of diseases and quarantines. Like with leprosy, they would put them outside the city till they were either, was cured or brought back from such disease or whatever, or such evil ways, then they were brought back in. But there's this separation that God uses, an exiling, when a man does certain events, like with Cain. He not only was a wanderer, he became exiled. He was both. He goes on and says, that Cain was a tiller of the soil. That was his expertise. He was to extract produce from the soil. But now, onward, from this point onward, with Cain, the earth would no longer yield its produce for him. Moreover, he would have no resting place on the earth. Society, too, will alienate itself from him. Normally, people would show kindness to a stranger without land or a position through their kindnesses. He finds his place and the means to a livelihood. But Cain will be denied even this. He is destined to be a wanderer in exile, without a resting place, without a people. The earth will reject him and society will forsake him. I'm going to read 13 and 14 together because he combines teachings here. It says, and Cain said to God, my sin is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have banished me today from the face of the ground, and I am to be hidden also from your countenance, and to be restless and friendless upon the earth. Why anyone who finds me may kill me. Rabbi Hirsch goes on where he talks about, where he says, my sin is greater than I can bear. He says, it cannot mean that my sin is too great to be eligible for atonement. That's not what it means. This doesn't mean that Cain could not make repentance in return. It's not what it means. Cain even goes on to explain in an explanation that makes no mention of sin, but only the punishment. So he doesn't make any mention of the sin, but the punishment. Accordingly, the word here for sin is avon. Has been taken to mean the punishment. So Cain is referring to the sin as the punishment and not the sin itself. He goes on and says, but it is by no means certain that this is the meaning, because in any event, the avon is a rule. It means sin. It's one of the words for sin, not for punishment. He goes on to, he says, let us assume here too that the avon means sin, in which case the verse means my sin is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have banished me today. This gives a profound insight into the dark mind of the criminal and into the divine justice, as we shall see. That my sin is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have banished me. Cain says, my sin is greater than I can bear. You, God, have shown me the severity of my sin. You have banished me today. You have severed the wedding bond. Remember, we talked about how man was wedded with the ground. You have severed the wedding bond between me and the earth. You have also withdrawn me from the light of your countenance, thus rejected by the earth, forsaken by God and man. I fear that any creature that meets me may kill me. This is pretty severe. I mean, let's listen to this. You have shown me the severity of my sin. For you have banished me today. You had severed my bond with earth. You have also withdrawn me from the light of your countenance, thus rejected by earth and forsaken by God and man. That's pretty heavy. But let's look at this. Let's look at what Cain's name meant, what he was born under. Rabbi Hirsch goes on and says, we see here Cain, whose birth was marked with the attitude. And if you remember this, you can go back when we were talking about the birth of Cain, because what his name means. He was birthed with the attitude of acquisition, whose character was stamped by the name Cain, which means to acquisition, to go and get things. Acquisition, that's what his name means. But this is interesting. Rabbi Hirsch goes on and says he was stamped with the name Cain, who was led to the crime by envy. Remember, his name means acquisition. Now his crime was led by envy. That desire to want what someone else has, to acquire. Reminds me a lot of the Ferengi in Star Trek. There's a lot of meaning in Star Trek and a lot of things that Roddenberry wrote in there. In the Next Generation, poverty, greed, everything was cured because they did away with money. Man had figured out how to exist without money. So all you had to do is find your place in society and develop yourself to the best of your ability, because you were able to have everything. You was able to have everything you need without having money. You didn't have to acquire what you needed to live by. So they introduced this race called the Ferengi, who lives by, I want to say, I can't remember, it's 39, 69, something like that, rules of acquisition. They were all about getting money. You really get to understand them in Deep Space Nine when you get to know the race and how everything that they lived by was to get from someone else. That was the rules of their society, was to acquire. Generally at all costs, to get what, if they saw something they wanted, they went. So we see here that it was envy that was fueled by the desire to acquire, that caused Cain to do what he did. Rabbi Hirsch says, now realizing that he has forfeited everything through his crime, he comes to an awareness of his sin, not by the thought of what he did to his brother. What he had done to his brother didn't cause the awareness of his sin. What caused the awareness of his sin was, but by the thought of what he has done to himself. Cain's character had not changed. If he were asked the same question again about his brother, he would again answer, am I my brother's keeper? My sin is too great, says Cain. Had I only murdered my brother, I could have borne my sin. But I did not know then that by murdering my brother, or murdering, I did not know then that by murdering him, I murdered myself. And this, I made myself a wanderer and an exile. And all my privileges in the world and in the society. Cain didn't have no thought for his brother. It still was all on him. By murdering him, I murdered myself. I made myself a wanderer. I made myself an exile. This is what how he became aware of his sin. He didn't come aware of his sin by the plight that his brother was laying there dead, never to live again. All of his prodigy who would ever come after him is gone. Even some of the sages, it says the reason why the voices in the Hebrew is plural, the voices of your blood. Do you hear the voices of your brother's blood? The voices, some of the sages says the voices that are crying out is all of the souls who would not be because of that murder. The generations and the thousands of years of people who would have been birthed through him ceased, never to exist. And sages talk about how that's one of the interpretations of the plural use of damim, and the voices of the damim of his bloods, plural, because damim is plural there in that passage. And so not only did he kill Abel, he killed every person that would have ever existed through him. This is one of the things that murder does when you kill someone. You don't just kill them, you kill everything that would come after them. All their good deeds that they would have ever done, the people they would have helped, is gone. So let's say if he even had a family and he'd killed him, but everything he would have done from that point on is gone. Any good deed, the person he may have saved from drowning, the money he may have given to help the poor, gone. This is the reason why Cain's predicament was that God put on him was so strong that he lost his bond between heaven and earth. He lost his bond from the Creator. He lost his bond with man and society. God took everything away from him and made him a wanderer in exile. Thus, Cain recognized that he sinned against himself. He sinned against himself. Not that he sinned against his brother. See, Cain is still not dwelling on what he done to his brother. He's now, his eyes are still on him. I sinned against myself. That is the why he describes his act as avoin, something perverse or crooked. Before I go into this last sentence and get into this next part that I want to end up with, is there anything, Ronald, we want to talk about, discussion on what we've covered? Oh, you're muted.
No, there isn't.
Okay. Any quick discussion in the Zoom room?
Yes, I've just linked together my thoughts. One second.
And sinus drainage this week. That's something supposed to happen in the fall and winter. Had some up and down weather. It's gone from 80 degrees back down to 39 the other night. I'm like, no, we're past those temperatures. All right. This last sentence that I was going through this morning here that covers for 13 and 14 opened up my mind to a whole. I mean, we could start over and go another whole full class just on this subject, but I want to kind of hit it here at the end. We covered some great stuff about Cain. I want to use this situation to talk about us. Because Rabbi Hirsch, right here at the end, he goes, the most direct route because we can look at what he's talking about here, because we just talked about Cain was all about himself. His sin was against himself. He killed himself. He never says anything about the damage he done to his brother. It was the damage he did to him. So Rabbi Hirsch, he concludes this teaching on verses 13, 14 with this sentence. The most direct route to one's goal and salvation is characterized as Yasher. I went, wow. You might want to write this down. Write this sentence down if you don't mind, if you have a way, or if you're taking notes. The most direct route to one's goal and salvation is characterized as Yasher. That is spelled in English Yashar. Had to write it in real small print, so I'm make sure I'm reading it. It's spelled with the Yud, the Shane, and the Resh. The reason why this jumped out at me because we learned something very interesting in the book of Job. We're going to look at Job 1. It's mentioned a couple of times, but we're going to look at verse 1, because where it's mentioned at everywhere else tells you to come back to verse 1 and read what the sages has written. Verse 1 of Job. There was a man in the land of Uz. Job, in Hebrew his name is pronounced Yov with a Y. Yov was his name. Now, this man was of unquestionable integrity, coupled with a probing mind. He stood in awe of God and eschewed evil. Okay, what's interesting is when you go to, hold on. I moved my marker this morning. Let me find it. Because this is mentioned again. Let me find it here. Had all this open and I had a couple bookmarkers and I moved one of them. Okay, still in chapter 1 and in verse 8, Hashem said to the Satan, the avenging angel, have you taken note of my servant Yov? For there is no one like him on the earth, a man of unquestionable integrity, coupled with a probing mind, fears God, shuns evil. So we hear the book opens up with that, and then we hear the Creator telling one of his serving angels, have you taken notice of my servant Yov, who is unquestionable integrity? The reason why that jumped out at me this morning, what Rabbi Hirsch wrote, is because the term right there, unquestionable integrity, is the Hebrew Tom Vayasher. Tom Vayasher. Tom is also mentioned in conjunction with Noah when we get there, when we get to that point, when we get to Genesis chapter 6. But the creator, he's talking about Job here, is a Yasher. He's a Yasher. And Rabbi Hirsch made the statement, the most direct route for one's soul and salvation is characterized in this word Yasher. Now, before I get into explaining that passage, I want to go back here to the opening introductory discussion about Job from the sages of Israel. The book of Job, according to the sages, the majority of the sages, says that Moses authored this book. It was given to the nations. It goes on, it says, the lessons of this book are indeed directed more to the nations than they are to Israel. For Israel has its Torah and can learn the truths concerning God's providence from those teachings, from the Torah they got at Sinai. But he says, not so with the nations. The nations wasn't given the Torah. The Torah belongs to Israel. But the sages go on and says, but not so with the nations, that they must learn their way to God along the tortuous highways and byways by which Job eventually learned the truth. The book of Job was given to the nations. Within the book of Job, there's not one mention of the Torah nor Israel. No Torah law, Israel, none of this. It was pre-Torah. We're going to be learning about, and we'll get here to a second, what's called Derek Eric's. It says Job is in defense of his mentions only the actions and attitudes as might be expected from any good human being. Nothing is mentioned of the social obligations that are derived from Torah law. Okay? I'm mentioning this because I want to bring up the fact, those of us of the nations, we do have the Torah law that we're given in the Sheva Mitzvahs that was handed down from Adam down to Noah. And with Noah, we got this, that got that seventh commandment of ever mean high, not eating meat taken from a living animal, which we'll get into when we get to that part in chapter 9. But
I think so.
we were given those laws, but they weren't, those are pre-Torah laws that were given. That the Torah law, the 7 is the foundation of the Torah law. The Torah given at Sinai does not supersede the 7 laws. It affirms them. And today we do not receive the 7 commandments, the Sheva Mitzvahs, through the authority of Noah, who was at his time was given to it, and he was given to his children, and Shem, basically Shem, who was the grandfather of Abraham, Abraham's lineage, because Shem and Ever, his grandson, taught Abraham and his sons There's a cave in Safat, Israel, right down the road from where my teacher lives, called the Cave of Shem and Ever, where they taught Abraham and his children and anyone else that want to be there the 7 laws. Wasn't called Noahide laws back then. That's just a modern term. But Shem passed what he got from his father down to Abraham. That's the reason why Abraham in chapter 18, when it says that God loved him because he taught his children and his household the ways of God, justice, and righteousness. That's because he was teaching them what he learned from Shem. So we have here that Rabbi Hirsch brings up the word Yasher, and Job is called a Yasher. And this has a lot, to help to do with us. He says here that the Yasher, the sages, let me see who, it doesn't give me the particular sage, but it says here, the Yasher is a man whose intellect directs his steps and human qualities into the straight and virtuous paths laid down by God. Remember, pre-Torah, these were laid down by God. He gave this stuff to Adam, and Adam passed it on. It was oral. It was an oral Torah. It was an oral message. Torah just means instruction. It was an oral instruction that went from Adam to his children, all the way down to Noah. And Noah passed it on to his children. And the beautiful thing is that, like, when we talk about the Greek wisdom that the Romans tapped into, the Greeks are the descendants of Japheth, the other brother that walked backwards with the covering. When Noah blessed Japheth, he said his tents would enlarge and he would dwell in the tents of Shem. It is known, the sages have taught, the sages of Israel has taught, that the world has been blessed through Japheth, the son of Noah, one of them that walked backwards with the blanket on his back. Through them, math, sciences, arts, the Greeks are the descendants of Japheth. And through them, the world, we got a lot of our mathematics, our geometries, the arts, the sciences. And we also got the virtues of wisdom, the virtue of courage, the virtues of temperance. We got what's they call the four virtues. I left out one. It was justice, the virtue of justice. All comes down through them. And this is what God called Job. He goes, this Yasher is my servant. His intellect, which directs his steps, is unquestionable. This is so powerful. And because this is the reason why when I got into this and I saw that, when you look at the generation of the flood, we're going to get over into this again when we get there. When you get to the generation of the flood, where in verse 6 is 11 and 12, it says, and 13 says, now the earth had become corrupt before God, and the earth had become filled with injustice. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupted, and all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. The words there, corrupted upon it, its way upon the earth. I've been studying this for years now. The words here is called derek eretz. They corrupted derek eretz, which is called the way of the land. Rabbi Hirsch, we learned a few weeks back that derek eretz is called also the way of culture. Now the sages have defined 6 areas that gives definition to what Derek Eric's is, the way of culture: social etiquette, ethical character, earning a living, contribution to society, intimate family life, and the stewardship of the earth. Those 6 areas is what the generation of the flood corrupted. And when we study, and like I said, I've been studying Stoicism, when I've been getting into the wisdom and the courage, the justice and temperance and everything that goes with them, learning to control what's within my control and letting go what's not, learning to control the negative emotions of anger and frustration, and learning all that. All of that ties into the Derek Eric's, the way of culture. They're part of each other. They're part of the virtue here that Job was, because it's intellect, the rational. Epictetus, who was a Roman slave for 30 years from the time he was born in slavery, he makes this statement in this book on discipline, on temperance. Ron Holiday puts this quote from Epictetus. He says, there are 2 words should be taken to heart and obeyed when exerting ourselves for good and restraining ourselves from evil. The words that brings blamelessness and an untroubled life is persist and resist. Persist to the good, resist the evil. And what does God say? If you checked out my servant Job, his integrity is unquestionable. He fears God and he shuns evil. And Rabbi Hirsch plainly tells us right here, he said the most direct route to one's goal in life and salvation, which salvation in Hebrew doesn't mean the same stuff as the alien faiths that's ruling the planet right now uses, is a Yasher, someone who is intellectually virtuous, uses their rational thinking to do good, to shun evil. The Ramban, one of the sages of Israel, Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Ben Nachman, Nachmanides is what he's also called. In his commentary on Genesis 6:11, 12, he said, God gave Noah the reason for the destruction of the earth. It was injustice. It's what's called Hamas in Hebrew, the violent robbery. The word corruption is always denotes moral corruption, especially in sexual sins. He says, because of injustice is known as a public sin. He goes on, the sages, the Sanhedrin 1:8 says, however, said that the reason only injustice is mentioned, violent robbery is mentioned here, is that through this injustice, the decree was sealed. And the reason why this sin sealed the fate of the generation is because it is a law that is intuitively understood. And the people had no need of a prophet to warn them. The people of the generation of the flood had everything intellectually to be a Yasher. And if they had turned themselves around and lived virtuous lives and stopped the injustice of the society, the flood would have never happened. They would have become servants of God, because God called Job a servant because of his integrity, because of his fear of God, because he shunned evil. That's the other coin that we live as I don't care for the word Noahide, but it's because we live with the Noahide laws as our divine assignment from God. These are the things that we're not supposed to do. But the other side of that coin is our personal, private lives of growing in integrity and virtue. Because when we live by virtue, there's no need of a prophet to tell you. It says that this law of injustice, this violent robbery that they were committing, was already understood inside of them. And that's why so many people, even today, they can't stand a thief. They can't stand a thief because they know inside that it's wrong. But because the people of the generation of the flood completely corrupted themselves with what they knew was wrong, the wrong path, and they chose it anyhow, it brought their destruction. And the same word Hamas is used against Nineveh in the book of Jonah, because of the thievery that city had the level of thievery had reached the same level of the generation of the flood. And therefore Jonah was sent to tell them that their city was about to be destroyed. And Jonah the prophet did not tell the city what their sin was. It was their king, which proves the Ramban's point that it's intuitive. When we go and when we begin to violate what is intuitive within us, and that's what the love thing about the Stoics teaching us is the wisdom about courage and justice and moderation, self-control, being that we are part of one person is a part of a huge. Zeno talked about a cosmopolitanism, which is what the Torah teaches, that we are our brother's keeper. And that's what cosmopolitanism is within Stoicism, is that we are part of a cosmic family and we're responsible for one another. That's all part of this intuitiveness, that we should have proper social etiquette, ethical character, going out earning our living where we're not a burden on society. Then we turn around and we contribute to the society. We contribute to our family. And then when we're doing that, we also become stewards of the earth. All of this ties in with what went wrong with the generation of the flood, what went wrong in Nineveh. And yet, Rabbi Hirsch ends his commentary on verses 13 and 14 with this very point, that one's goal in salvation is through the characteristic of Yasher, of integrity, virtue. And I thought, wow, it was just amazing. I mean, it connected that little bitty piece with Genesis 6:11 and 12 right there. It connected it with Job. And it connected it with Nineveh. All of this tells us what we were supposed to, as the Gentile nations, how we're supposed to be living. Our integrity should be in concert with what we call the Noahide laws, which today, because we get them through Moses and not Noah, because God reaffirmed them with Moses at Mount Sinai, and Moses repeated them, and Israel's supposed to be teaching these to us. And so our personal walk with God in everyday life and our walk with man should be in concert with Israel, in concert with the Noahide laws of no idolatry, no blasphemy, no theft, no murder, no forbidden sexual relations, no eating meat of a from a living animal, and setting up courts of justice. All this is to be the package. Matter of fact, where did I do it? Yeah, right here. I even made a chart This is a chart of my human life, what I'm responsible for with God and man. The way of culture, which we've gone through, social etiquette and stuff. The four cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance works with those 6 areas. And then the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. No idolatry, no blasphemy, no homicide, no theft, no illicit intercourse, no eating meat from a living animal, and carry out justice. This is what our role is on the earth. Israel has the role of being priest. And so many people get tied in wanting to do a lot of, a lot of Jewish things are attractive, but we don't have to be that. We have to be this. And that's what's beautiful. And that's what, at the end of talking about everything that Cain done, he ended with the word Yasher. And it took me automatically to Job. And God says, have you looked at my servant? He didn't say anything about laws and this and that. He says that he had unquestionable integrity, his virtues, his intellect. He served God through his intellect. He chose to fear God. He chose to shun evil. And that's such a lesson for us to learn from. The Sages even says that book is for us to learn from, because we weren't given the Torah. We were given the book of Job to learn from, to how to walk with God with integrity, how to be his servants with integrity. So Ronald, I always wanted to bring that in as we closed out, 12, we'll get into 15 and on next week, God willing. But when I seen that word Yasher, it jumped up off the page to me. I'm like, oh man, things I've been studying for, not only the last couple of years, but what I've really gotten in since January. Just like, it's amazing. We are to be Yasher. We're to have high standards of integrity, high standards of virtue. Matter of fact, the Stoics says virtue is the only good. Of course, we know that, Hashem is the only good, but where does virtue come from? Where does integrity come from? It comes from Hashem, from the Creator. And it was enough to call Job his servant. It was enough that Rabbi Hirsch, a great rabbi, lived 200 years ago, who's well respected in amongst Israel's Torah teachers, says that one's goal in salvation comes through the characteristics of Yasher. If that had been Cain's mindset, if Cain had been a Yasher, 1, he wouldn't have brought the offering he did. 2, even if he did, he would have learned his lesson. When God turned his back, he would say, oh, I done something wrong, and he would have fixed it right there. And the murder of Cain or Abel would have never happened. His integrity would have led him to the truth. But he didn't. He had the characteristic of envy, of acquisition, because of his name. And the Sages even gets in and talks about one's name. It's a big issue within Torah that they even recommend. I've heard them even among Gentiles. If you're given a name that is dark, that can bring darkness and evil, it's best to go to change that name. There's a big discussion on one's character and personality surrounding their name. And it's worth doing maybe a little study for, personal study on it. But all right, Ronald.
Well, having it listed in multiple places shows the importance of it, and to remind us and to instill upon us this is our role and how we're to live.
And you might even think about who you know personally. Look at their character and look at their name and see how close it is. It's like my brother. My mom named my brother Brian, Bryan. It means strong. And boy, is he his strength scared my dad when he was a teenager. He took after my mom's dad's side, Papa and um, our cousins on that side. They were strong men, and he still is. I'm 4 years older, and I mean, and he's a head taller than I am, and um, I've seen him do things when I was a teenager, and I'm like, what in the world? And he just has a natural strength. So I said, yeah, mom named you right. You one strong boy. And he has been. My dad literally told me one time in private, because they worked together roofing, and he made my brother mad, and he was afraid he was going to throw him off the roof. And he goes, your brother would have done that. He would just pick me up and throw me. And he told me that in confidence. He goes, he doesn't know his strength. He's like, so yeah, your name, think about your name, and go
Any,
ahead, Ronald.
any comments from the Zoom room? Gary?
All right.
Yeah,
We can
I
bring
understood.
class to the close.
Yes, we can draw it to an end for this week. Very good. You catching on and filtering through and finding verses in other sections that relate totally to the subject matter, and how the reminder is there that we can see where we should be at and consequences of when we're not at the right spot. All immensely helpful. Restructuring our lives is not necessarily easy.
Oh no, it's hard. Even what I'm learning from the Stoics, they said it's very difficult, you know, in times to learn to resist. I'm in the process of not getting frustrated over things that's outside of my control, like at work. I'm the type of person. My personality is, if I start something, I want to finish it before I do something else. I'm just because when I did heating and air for 20 something years, I laid out my job in my mind. I had a starting point and I had an ending point, and that's what I went after. And so now that in the job that I do, I'll be in the middle of doing something, like let's say I'm doing a credit on something and I want to do that. And I go from A to Z. I'll do it to the point where when I take the part that returned and I do the credit, I go put it in its place. If it's in a return bin, going to go back to Toyota or Lexus, I have bins for that. Or if it's going to go back on the stock shelf, it'll do that. I do that one ticket from start to finish, but then I'll get an email. Hey, I need you to check on this, or I can get some, an order come through that needs this, and I'm like, let me finish what I was doing first. So I get these frustrations because of my character of wanting, I'm an A to Z character. It's not that I'm OCD or anything, but over the years, it kind of became that. And it's taken me time to learn that these interruptions that I get in my job are beyond my control. And I'm trying not to get frustrated because I'm having to tell myself, okay, this outside of your control. You could not have done anything about this. So, like the Stoic says, it's not the event that causes anger or frustration. It's your judgment of the event that causes your frustration or anger. It's your own judgment. It's your impression of what just happened is what causes it. And at first, I really wasn't getting what they're saying, but because of this little stuff I deal with every day at work, it's nothing bad, but it's an area that I feel like God is using to show me that this is a small area you can work on that will help with the bigger areas. And I'm learning that. And yes, changing our lives to be Yasher, people of high integrity, is not simple in a non-integrity world, if I can use the word non-integrity. It can be rough sometimes. But go ahead, Ronald.
Yeah, I have the opposite habit. I refocus from what I'm doing to something else. And 3 hours later, I remember that I was halfway through something else and have to go back to it. But follow through one job at a time, it's complete. But I very rarely do that. But I just somehow lose focus of where I'm at and think of something else I need to be doing and go and start that. And at the end of the day, you can possibly have half a dozen things and nothing's completed. But if you get it, the first job done as you've started it, you complete it, and it's away, it's out. You don't have to worry about it. Don't have to catch up later on. But there's a lot of little details, isn't there? And they're minuscule in a way. They don't look like they're important, but it builds a process. It makes your mind function better because you're keeping an order instead of being in disarray.
Yeah. I drive my wife crazy with my single-minded. If there's a picture in the dictionary besides single-mindedness, it would have my picture. I drive her nuts because I get so frustrated when I'm in the middle of something and I got to stop. I think I get that from my dad. My dad taught me how to work. My dad taught me my work ethic. And so he probably taught me that aspect as well. I don't remember because I've worked with him since I was a kid up through until I was a teenager, and he helped me get my first public job. But a lot of my early working life was with my dad, and I gained a lot of knowledge from him in that area. And that's probably where I got my single-mindedness to start a job and finish it. So.
Okay. We can draw it to a close then.
Yep.
So any communication, you can come to us at outreachnoah@gmail.com. And as Terry said earlier, this will be up in the next day or so on Power Faith Radio, and later tonight it will be available on YouTube as well, won't it, Terry? Or is that instant after we finish?
No, it's instant after we finish it. It just tomorrow, generally on Thursday mornings, Thursday morning or Friday morning, I'll get the edits, the title and stuff, and the thumbnails added to it. But it's up to be watched now. As soon as we close, it'll be up to watch. It just the edits won't be up there.
Right, and we've got for those who are in Veronica's book club, that's on tomorrow, isn't it, Veronica?
Veronica, we have our book thing tomorrow. Are you able to do it?
Yep, I've got good cell service out here so far.
Okay.
Good. And also this weekend we've got Rabbi Moshe Shulman, Noahide Pass, Zoom meetings, and the third session, which is the one for the US in particular, will be on live streamed on YouTube as well on Noahide Nations, I think it is it? Dan does? Noahide. I get confused with a couple of those in Israel.
I think it is 7 o'clock Eastern, and then I think you work it out the rest.
Yeah, 7 p.m. Eastern, the third one. First one, I can't tell you. I can only tell you in my times. I know what my times are, but I know. And I won't be at the last one anyway. I've got a medical appointment at the hospital, so I've told Dan, and he says, just as long as you're there for the for the second one, because he needs to leave early on that one to take over from him. So that's all fine, but yeah, I'll miss what I consider the best one because it builds over the first two to the third one, but then again, it'll be on YouTube for me to revisit it, being missing from that one. But yeah, so we've got that this weekend as well. And you're losing my face there.
I was wondering if you had that fly that came back.
It must be a different one. I
you
don't
disappeared
live that long.
for a second.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't. Yeah, I know. I seem to get one every meeting these days. That's because I've got to have the door open for the dog to get in and out. And I always seem to get one in here. when I'm on Zoom.
And they land on your camera. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I know, but it's been doing it today again earlier. But you're on speaker view, so no one was really noticing. I was just waiting for you to say, "Did you have your
Yeah, you
hand up, Ronald,
completely
when I waved it
disappeared.
off?"
Yeah, you completely disappeared.
Yeah, I know. I just looked across at YouTube, and I could see, oh, I'm not there. Okay, well, thanks for everybody joining us.
Thank you.
Those watching on YouTube, if you like our content, give us a thumbs up. And links are put out every week, and we're here usually at 10 a.m. my time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, US. And we will see you next week.
All right. Goodbye. Good night.
Good night.
Good morning. Good evening.